Sandeep, can you please explain us the College Board suite of exams, its benefits, and how these exams are accepted in India?
Absolutely. Thanks once again for Manya Princeton Review to organize this session, especially around this time. Things are so uncertain. All of us are going through the times of pandemic. So I think this session even makes more sense for students, especially who are looking to study outside of India, and not just outside of India, but also in India, because there are certain updates related to the SAT. We started offering admissions at Indian universities through the SAT. I'm going to talk about that. I'll explain what PSAT is, and of course, advanced placement, and how students can get benefit out of taking these exams, or essentially college board programs. So, for those who are not so familiar with College Board, let me give you a quick introduction. We are about a 120-year-old organization based out of the US. And College Board essentially supports students about with over 185 countries, 7 million students, through the use of our programs, which is SAT, PSAT, and advanced placement. And College Board really is like a bridge that connects students who are in high school and wish to go to universities around the world. Um, and we own and administer the SAT test, which students can take multiple times. In India, we're going to talk about a little more what the test is. But before that, I want to spend maybe 5 minutes here explaining how the SAT suite of assessment um, has been designed, and how can a student really interpret uh, what they should be looking at based on the kind of grade they are in currently, right? So on the very right, you see SAT. So SAT is nothing but a standardized test which is based on certain skills, right? So it's not a knowledge-based test, but a skill-based test, which is used by universities around the world when you are applying to universities for your undergraduate program, right? So we are talking about skills like reading, writing, comprehension, problem solving, uh, critical thinking. Some of these skills which are essential uh, for a student to have, even I would uh, dare say more essential than any subject knowledge. That is what universities are trying to assess through a standardized test, right? So for a student, this is SAT is essentially that opportunity to showcase to the universities that you possess those skills and you are ready to join and excel at their undergraduate program, right? Now, the word standardized essentially is used as a benchmark or yardstick, or a way which is measurable and which is global, right? You would imagine when at a university in the US, there are students who are applying from coming from different backgrounds, coming from different education boards, coming from different countries. Now, in that scenario, for a university to assess students uh, academically, it becomes a challenge, right? So, SAT is that tool that universities really can interpret the scores on the SAT. Universities can really easily interpret what it means for a student's academic performance, right? That's why it's one of the only global tests which is accepted by universities around the world, and it doesn't matter which country or background you come from. Uh, your performance is really good indicator of how well you are likely to do uh, at a college or a university. In fact, College Board does this study every year where we try to look at the first year performance of students, um, and compare it with how they performed on the SAT. Uh, and surprisingly, even with a very diverse set of universities, there's always this correlation that students who tend to perform well on the SAT uh, also tend to do well in their first year college or first semester at their college, right? But again, uh, while academic may be one of the criterias for admissions at these universities, you must be aware universities assess you holistically, where they're looking at different aspects of your application, but academics always remain this one top criteria that universities want to be sure of, right? So that is the opportunity that SAT really presents for a student, is to showcase these skills in the way that universities understand, or rather admission officers of these universities really understand, right? Now, students typically start looking at SAT all the way from grade 11. right? Some students want to uh, plan early. Some students want to take the SAT when they are in grade 12. But mostly the trend internationally is that students would want when the academic pressure is not as high as in grade 12. In grade 11 itself, they would get a standardized score or a SAT score out of the way, right? And of course, you have multiple opportunities to take the test. If you wish to improve on your scores, there are 5 administrations or attempts, as you call it, that we offer to students in India or international students. So you can plan in which admin or which month you wish to take the test. When will you need the actual scores and start applying to the universities? You can sort of create a map for yourself. Now, on the left, what you see as PSAT, it's nothing but a prelim version of the SAT, but that is for students who may be in grade 8, 9, or grade 10, right? So you need to understand that SAT is not just a system of testing, but we're also helping students to gradually develop on these skills which actually matter in college or in life itself, right? So typically students would start with a PSAT 8 or 9. Let me show you some of the benefits why students would think about PSAT. So PSAT is not a competitive test, but it's essentially a diagnostic tool which helps students to deep dive and understand where do they stand on these skills, which will eventually be tested on the SAT, right? Because like you would know, what you can't measure, you can't manage. So similarly, in PSAT, if you start early, you get very detailed reports. If your school conducts the PSAT, your school would get a very detailed report, and uh, your schools can also align the curriculum and pedagogy to improve on these skills, right? So PSAT again is not competitive. You're not reporting your scores to the university, but it's rather for you to get a very good understanding of where you stand currently, right? And PSAT is conducted at different schools across the country. Uh, so it's you cannot directly register and take the PSAT, but you will have to work with your schools. In case your school is not conducting PSAT currently, you can request your school to get in touch with College Board and will help your school to organize the PSAT. Again, it's a very low cost. You have to spend about $20. Uh, but again, you get great insights. You get a report like this. Again, this is a very small sample, and your scores on the PSAT are comparable to what if you were to take SAT at this time, what is the kind of score you might be looking at. Again, this is grade appropriated, which means the kind of skills that a grade 8, ninth, or a grade 10 student needs to have uh, is is what PSAT tells you about. The difference between, you must have seen something there that says PSAT 10 or NMSQT. The only difference there is that NMSQT is essentially a version of PSAT 10, but students who may be US citizens, they can apply for certain scholarships through NMSQT. But since the calendar suits Indian students better, most schools would conduct NMSQT for grade 10 students as well, right? We've spoken about that. Now, coming back to the story of the SAT, uh, like I mentioned earlier, it's conducted 5 times uh, in India currently, starting from the month of March, May, August, October, December. Unfortunately, due to COVID last year, the calendar looked differently. There were disruptions to the test delivery because, as you would understand, keeping health and safety guidelines in mind, schools and test centers were not able to deliver the test. So there were certain disruptions, but this is the kind of calendar uh, you need to keep in mind. Again, plan it well. Something I suggest to all students that you really need to understand with a standardized test, you need to have a proper strategy in place, which means that when are you going to actually use these scores? How many times you might need to take the test? When do you need to start preparing? Because every student has a different sort of journey for preparation of these tests. Some students would take 3 months, some students would take longer or even shorter, right? So you need to take certain practice tests with the SAT and understand the kind of score range you are in currently and the score range you wish to get to, right? Uh, and based on that, you need to have a strategy in place. How do you get to those scores, and how do you know what kind of score ranges you should be looking at? You should look at the list of universities you're likely to apply to, right? So universities present these data, they publish this data, which is for their previous class, what is the kind of score ranges they took students on. So that is always a very good indicator or a benchmark to start with, what you should be targeting before you even start preparing, right? So those are some of the tips I thought I could also share with you. Now, what you're going to encounter on the test, and I'm not going to deep dive, keeping time in check, what each of these section has, but essentially it's a test which earlier had 3 sections, but going forward, the optional essay section is going away. That's the big update post June 2021 for students internationally. Now, there are 2 sections, as SAT always had, which is evidence-based reading and writing. Again, it's a 200 to 800 point section. A math section, which is again 200 to 800 point. Total that adds up to 1600 points. That is the kind of composite score that you get out of 1600, and then you get cross-test scores and a whole bunch of other scores that help you to deep dive and understand what are the areas you are doing well in these skills, and what are the areas you still need some work on, right? So it's a 3-hour test. Just please note that the essay section is going away. It's getting discontinued globally, and universities are aware of this change. So we always ensure that we work with universities whenever there are big changes to the SAT. So universities have been informed about this decision. So you will no longer be required to take the additional essay. Uh, in terms of scores, I think I mentioned this briefly, but this is the kind of report we also give to students, where it's not just that one score out of 1600, but like I said, SAT suite of assessment is also a system where we are trying to help students to build on these skills, right? So unless you also get a chance to maybe slightly deep, a little, have a deep dive into your performance, you may not understand what are the areas you still need some work on, right? Uh, so spend time with these reports, especially if you're somebody who may be looking at taking the test multiple times, right? So another big update for all the students uh, is that the subject test is also going away post June 2021. So that is the last admin globally when we are going to conduct uh, uh, the subject SAT. For those who are not aware, these were additional 1 hour long tests which were needed by very specific institutions for very specific programs. And over the years, the usage had gone down. And just to reduce the burden on students, then College Board and universities collectively decided to discontinue the subject test. And again, universities are informed of these changes. So don't worry if you're not able to take the subject test, or if you're not submitting the scores, you won't be at any disadvantage. Universities have been informed. And the subject test, the purpose of subject test was essentially to showcase a student's interest or proficiency in any particular discipline, right? So you could take a subject test, say in physics or say mathematics, um, and that requirement has now at some level been replaced by AP or advanced placement program, which I'm going to talk about slightly later. But AP or advanced placement, in a nutshell, it's a high school level curriculum which College Board also runs for international schools. In India, we follow a slightly different model. But again, AP is a good way for students who wish to showcase a certain subject proficiency still to the universities. They can still take AP exams and present those scores, right? Uh, Now for calendar, how does the calendar for 2021 looks like? Uh, these are the dates which are published as of now. Uh, and you can always go on collegeboard.org SAT. That's our official website, and you can register. You can have a look at the calendar, but make sure you are aware of the last date to register, which typically is exactly a month before the test date, right? Uh, and also in June, we only have subject test. As I mentioned, that is the last admin when we'll have subject test. After that, it's going to get discontinued. So there's no SAT. Uh, the next SAT will be conducted in the month of May, uh, and the last date to register is, of course, April 8th. So if you're somebody who's not registered yet, you can just go ahead and register yourself. Find a open test center and register yourself. Post June, there are dates which have not been confirmed yet. I'll show you the calendar which is anticipated for international students. Again, these are not confirmed, so registrations have not opened for these dates, but it will be announced soon. But again, most likely these are the dates you're going to be looking at. So, but because you have all these dates well in advance with you, again, going back to the earlier point that I mentioned, you need to create a strategy and really start looking at when do you want to start preparing, which are the months you need to take the SAT, and when will you get the scores, and when you realistically start applying to the universities, right? Uh, Now, for practice, you can also use this free resource we've created with Khan Academy in case you want to practice certain full-length tests. All right, so just to reiterate, SAT, again, it's a test which is used by many universities around the world during admissions, standardized tests, a skill-based test. Uh, and it's not just India or the US, there are over 60 other countries which accept SAT for different purposes, right? It could either be for admissions or it could also be for scholarship, right? For example, there are really good universities in Australia where students, if they score well on the SAT, universities are pretty happy giving them a merit-based scholarships, right? Let me show you a small screenshot of who these universities essentially are. Uh, and as you can see, the universities are spread across the world. McGill, which is in Canada, Cambridge in UK, Yale in US, Hong Kong, Singapore. You can apply to over 6,000 universities, of course, the popular ones in the US. Uh, Due to COVID, there has been certain disruptions, as you would understand, because the test, there has been challenges in delivering the test. So there has been certain updates to how universities are using standardized test scores. So I would suggest that students maybe need to put in a little bit more work in this situation and really read admissions, updated admissions policies of these universities and understand what is the university's current standing in terms of how they are looking at standardized scores. Everyone has a different policy at this time, but again, the SAT remains this one strong indicator of your academic performance when you're applying to these international universities, especially. Uh, in India, and this is something very exciting, we started this work 3 years back. We have now over 42, in fact, we have 44 universities who we work with who also started accepting SAT for admissions. And in fact, IIM Ranchi has joined our alliance, and they will also start accepting. They've recently launched a 5-year program in management uh, where you can also apply with the SAT. So these universities that you see listed here, again, this is not a complete list. So to programs which range from engineering at VIT to a liberal arts and science program at Ashoka, uh, or say at NMIMS BBA program, you can apply to a whole range of programs through the SAT, right? So what we are also trying to create here in India is this opportunity where students don't have to take a whole lot of different tests, and maybe just with one test they can apply to all of these universities, right? What we also did for students who are bright students but may not have the means to afford education at these universities, we've started a scholarship program, which we call as the India Scholars Program. Uh, Very briefly, I'll tell you what are the three qualifying criteria for any students, and this may interest some students, I'm assuming here. Uh, the first criteria for any students who may be interested to make use of this program is if their family's household income is up to 8 lakhs annually, you score a 1300 on the test, and if you secure admission into one of the universities who is working with College Board in India, participating in the program, then your entire college tuition fee is waived off for 3 or 4 years of the program, right? So College Board and the university together supports your tuition fee, and you may be setting at zero tuition fee if you are able to secure the scholarship, of course, after qualifying on all three criteria here. I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to very briefly touch upon what advanced placement program is. So advanced placement program is this high school curriculum, which is one of the most rigorous curriculums in the world, in fact, and used by high schools, especially in the US. In India, we follow a slightly different model where students can self-prepare. Even if your school doesn't teach AP as a curriculum, you can take AP exams at these test centers after self-preparing. And what AP helps you with are these three areas. The first one is that if you score well on the AP, and just to remind you, AP, there are 38 subjects in which AP courses are offered. So unlike SAT, which is skill-based, AP really dives really deep into a particular academic discipline, whether it's calculus or history. And it's one of the most rigorous curriculums. It doesn't matter if you're a student between grade 9 and 12, anyone can take AP. You can also choose how many number of subjects you wish to take exams for. So there are no foundations there. That way, AP is entirely flexible. And it's also recognized by universities around the world, especially some of the most selective universities. They're also involved in creating these AP courses. What AP also allows you, and the main reason why students around the world take AP is because AP allows you to gain college level credits, right? So if you do enough AP courses, you can also skip a whole semester. Students do that. You can save on your college tuition fee by not repeating those courses. Advanced placement essentially means that you're not going to repeat those courses. So for example, if there's a calculus course as part of your college program, you may not have to repeat and retake that course, but maybe just present your AP scores, right? So it really helps you to stand out during your admissions at some of the most selective universities. And they also offer you credits based on their AP policies, right? So I'm going to stop here. I know that was a lot of information to process and take. I will hand it over back to Nirmala, and possibly towards the end of the session, take a few questions if there are any.
That's really informative, Sandeep. Really, yes, a lot of things. And it is very nice to know that, students need not take individual entrance exams to apply for Indian universities. They can just apply SAT, they can just take SAT and apply globally and also in India. That is a great news for high school kids for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So now, SAT is, not like our school exams. Okay. So it has its own nuances. Chris Nath, SAT master trainer from Princeton Reviews, here with us to share a few techniques and strategies quickly. And Chris is mentoring SAT kids since 2004. 15 plus years of mentoring SAT kids. That's great. Chris, can you please share us?
Absolutely. And so that's me on the screen right there. Don't mind me, I actually took that picture when I finished taking my SAT for the last time. I do still go and take these tests because I'm responsible for teaching you. how to get this behind you where it belongs. So when it comes to like test preparation in general, you got to look at the big picture of it. I've worked with the Princeton Review for just about 17 years now. And in these 17 years, I've learned one key thing. People do way too much work on this test. You want to have a big set plan in mind so you know how much of it you actually have to do to get the job done. When it comes to the SAT and the ACT, these tests are beasts. They are forever long. They're early in the morning when you're still trying to wake up. Have you ever just gone to school and not been awake until you got home like later that day? You're just in a fog the whole day. And this test is something that can definitely like exploit that feeling. I know the first section being the reading test, a lot of people try to read every single word in the passage, and then they go to a question, but then what do you do after you read the question? You're more than likely going to jump back into the passage and reread. So you're now spending at the very least double time on a question. That's not a luxury we have to afford. This test can be prepped for, the ACT can be prepped for. As far as individual college admissions, I wish I knew every single detailed piece of data to give to you. I don't, but if you check out our website, princetonreview.com, you can begin the college search in that way. You're basically just going to focus on finding the numbers that the colleges are allowing for purposes of admissions. With the tests, they overlap a lot in the content. With the SAT and the ACT, you're going to have to focus on grammar, math, reading. With the ACT, it does have the inclusion of the science test, but it's not exactly like a science test that you have in class. It's more about identifying like trends, data extraction, being able to jump to like founded conclusions. When it comes to the tests, you have to have the big ideas in mind. I use right now, I call them the big three: the POOD, the PO, the pacing, and then we're going to talk about this bottom right corner shortly. On the tests, it is put in an order to make you kind of run out of time or panic and not get to every question or feel like you have to rush through other parts later on because you spent too much time early on. With the reading test, if you happen to be attempting all 5 passages on the SAT and your accuracy is just a little over 30 correct, you're actually killing your score because you're trying to force more questions into the test than you're actually giving yourself fair time to get. SAT reading, ACT reading, these are open book tests. You just have to find the answer. And that's where I say to look into your personal order of difficulty. You have your own list of what's good for you, what's not good for you, what you like, what you hate. More importantly, what's going to be taking too much time and which questions you can just knock out of the park lightning quick. When I get to the practice questions shortly, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, how to start picking your battles. You essentially want to take the easy for you test first. That's what the personal order of difficulty is. We affectionately call it the POOD. You just have to listen to your gut. If you feel good with the content, run into that question, knock it out of the park. If you know you can do it, it's going to take you a little bit more time. Hold off. Do not at all do that question. You need to come back later. You have to create time where time does not exist. We do that by taking out the trash. With the process of elimination here, well, a lot of people go into these tests looking for like what makes it a good answer. When you're looking for a good answer, you're much more open-minded to the nuances of the answers that are actually exactly why they're wrong. We have to be careful. Like if I say I have wet hair, what could you infer? People think shower, rain, pool, water. I didn't say any of that. All of those could be true. I only said I have wet hair though. I don't even know if it was water. The correct answer would just be a very vanilla answer. My hair is not dry, but it doesn't look as good as the other ones. 3 out of the 4 answers are bad. It is way easier to fall for a trap answer than it is to actually find the good. You're going to get to the good by getting rid of the bad. because the sections are long, you have to have the game plan. You need to know your job 100% of the time. If you ever start from the beginning of a question and you stop reading halfway and you're just doing calculations, be very careful. Make sure that you know exactly what they're asking you. In algebra, for example, you're trained to solve for the value of X. On the SAT, you'll get that exact same question, but you won't be asked for the value of X. You'll be asked for the value of 3X. But answer A will be that value of X that you found. So you can know how to do the question flawlessly, but still get it wrong. It's designed to kind of like wage psychological warfare, honestly. We want to make sure that we're doing the job required per question. Because though you may not work every question, you will answer every question. That's what the letter of the day is. Like, my name's Chris, so I go with C. C for Chris and C for correct. It just works. If C works for you, that's yours. Enjoy. There's no one answer that jumps out all the time, like, or more popular than any other. I just don't want you to ever leave a blank. You don't get any penalty for it. You want to troubleshoot up for the best, especially if you're leaving out an entire reading passage. If you spell your guest letter for one of those passages, you're going to get a couple of free points without doing any work at all. Because the multiple choice, you'll know how much or how little work you actually have to do to get the job done. Last time I took my math calculator section, it's clocking in at 55 minutes. I was done in about 12. No calculator. I'm always done in 3 minutes. Wait, it's not a math test. It's not because I'm a mathematician. No, it's going to be because I know how to take the test. Just have to learn the craft. If you go into it doing what you do in school, well, in school, you get the good grades because you're doing that. This is not a school test. This is a standardized test. Just have to know how to play the game. Process of elimination to the rescue, like right away, if I ask what's the capital of Malawi, if you don't know, well, don't Google it. Find the answer. Spoiler alert. You just have to know how to take out the trash. And that's why I say to my students, 75% of this test is garbage. Your job, get rid of it. Take out the trash. There's a lot of bad answers, which means they are friendly to find. So, like at the bottom of your screen here, store raises the price of an item by 20%, decreases that price by 15%. If you're thinking 5, beautiful. It took you about half of a second, which means we probably got trapped. That's not what's going on here. We actually show like how to just plug in a number and do the steps so you can verify to yourself. The reason people assume 5 incorrectly, it's a 20% to 15%. It's a quick calculation. Yay. Percentages are never impossible. Just have to be very careful the order that you're progressing through a question. So, answering too quickly, know your job. Actually, a beautiful way to kind of like slow down your process when you're looking at the questions. Grab your pencil, underline the core components of the question. If anything, start at the end of the question. Read that job first so you know exactly what you're doing. If you have any quick calculations, be careful. A lot of bad answers can look really good along the way when you start to see familiar numbers. Be careful, but be aggressive. Doing anything in your head, it's probably the biggest hurdle that you gotta get over. I only allow my students to do like 1 step of mental calculation at the absolute most. Other than that, let your pencil leave a trail. But even if you're not gonna finish the entire question right there and you gotta come back to it, I don't want you spending more time going on and doing what is or what you have already done potentially. Make sure you're getting it all out of your head. Misreading the problem happens all the time. One of the most commonly looked over prepositions is the word of. If you've ever like encountered an email or a circular thing that was like flying out to you that said, count the number of F's in this paragraph. You get through the paragraph, you swear you only found 1 F. You scroll down about 50 times and it turns out there are like 100 F's and they're all in the word of. It's not sounding like a true F, it sounds like a V. And so that means we're not really going to register it when it comes back. So statements in math like of the remainder, of what's left, that's usually where downfalls start. Even in the writing and language, prepositional phrases. Each of the dogs wants the bone. Everybody goes by sound. You're not alone if you do that. Not saying you're never going to get a point. I'm saying you will never get enough points if you go by sound. Test writers know that's what the majority of people do. So they are going to try to find sentences that sound beautifully correct, but are 100% grammatically horrifying. Do not let your ear judge for you. You need to know the rules to play the game. And of course, when you just reach that factor, if you ever read a math question and it felt like it was written in ancient Sanskrit, so to say, run away from that question. And I can't believe I just said to run away. I sincerely despise cardio, but do not commit to that question there. You need to go and put your time where is the most efficient for you and where it's going to have the biggest payoff. Your time is always the most valuable commodity on this test. So here's like an example of a reading question. A lot of my students always jump to this. We call it a vocab and context question. With the vocabulary and context, notice they're just asking you in line 60 the word rest most nearly means. Well, okay, so I always do kind of pose this to my class next. They're telling you to go to line 60. Should you go to line 1 and catch up? Would I absolutely have to read 59 earlier lines just to define that one word? Don't be that person. No, you only want to do what will get the job done. If anything, though, do be careful because in this question, the word rest, you're more than likely very familiar with it. The questions that you're asked about for these types, you're never going to be unaware of the word. They're going to be very friendly, which means you got to be very skeptical of the answers provided. Since it's a friendly word, they're going to kind of want you to pick the traps, which would be the very first direct definitions. You're not asked to define the word in general. You're asked to define the word in its usage in that sentence. Notice I've taken in line 60 the word rest out of the show. We simply have to now read the sentence, try to come up with a prediction. Even still, though, a lot of people will start reading the sentence with every word inserted. Gross. Do not do that. That's not at all what they're asking you to do here. You must be prepared to be aggressive, but ignore those answers as long as you can. When you're going into it, you want to create the blank. You want to jot down what you're actually putting down or into that blank. And then it's process of elimination. Then too, all religious precepts are based on interpretation, rely on. The only answer, depend. Recline, pause, those would be the technical first definitions for the word rest. I'm not saying they're always wrong, but I'm saying you better be 1,000,000,000% certain before you pick a first definition of an easy word. Because punctuation can even show up on the SAT and the ACT. These are going to directly transfer over. With the grammar, so many people just judge it based on how it sounds. Have to be very careful. Things that sound good, usually I have to be skeptical of picking the answer that says no change or that it's fine as is. Be careful. Do not play that game. When you have to change your score on a test like this, the only way to change your score, you got to change what you're doing. Like you have to be prepared to throw out your entire game plan and learn a trade. That's how I've had my job for this almost 17 years now. My students aren't standardized. These tests are standardized, which means they are tackleable. I've had a career based on that. I help people get where they need to go. Give me 3 hours of your life. I'll give you your future. Whole life you've been told, if you don't answer every single question, you'll fail. Or if you don't show all your work, you'll fail. If you don't take the entire SAT or ACT, congratulations, you're going to get into college. You just have to know your number. And that's where the college searches come into play, either at our website or their individual websites. Know your number. Not a single school requires a 1600. I promise you that. A lot of people make 1600 their goal score, and it's absolutely unsubstantiated why. That's not the job here. Your job, do what you need to get where you want. Like here in math, one of the most common things that trips a lot of people up is the heavily tested concept on the test, the algebra. The subscore is called heart of algebra. A lot of different things. People make this section way worse than it actually is, either the no calculator or the calculator. In this section, you're gonna see like I have to get what's equivalent to that quadratic. And if I'm looking at my answers, I've got the vertex form, which means I've got to do my favorite thing in math ever and complete the square. It's a party, I know. It's the best thing in the world. I love it almost as much as I love polynomial long division. Here though, that individualizes this question. I've got to look at a universal ideology to tackle things like this consistently. And it all starts with the answers. Notice you have the letter X. I have a variable that is pushing me into algebra or algebraic calculation. I'm going to plug in an easy number. And when I say an easy number, not zero. Anything times zero, game over. Anything divided by zero, even more impossible. Then 1, that's an identity number. Can't be done. It doesn't change anything. Start with 2. If I let, I should move that there for now. If I let x equal 2, you're going to have the 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 11. Notice I've got it equal to the number 7. That's what we call the target answer. You're going to circle it. You need to make it pop off the page. Be very clear when you're showing your work. You then have to take your value of x, that 2, go into all 4 of your answers, eliminating what doesn't match. When you do that, you got your answer. It matches up, and it will work for just about any number that you use whenever like you're following the restrictions of it. Just be careful. Don't do it in the head. Get it down on paper in front of you. My favorite technique, and I've yet to ever see anything more efficient than this. I have rational expressions here. I'm finding the difference, and I've got to make them equal to 2. If you were to do this, your algebra teacher would make you multiply the first fraction by a plus 1 over a plus 1, the second one by a minus 1 over a minus 1, and then the right-hand side, all of that. Then do some simplification, combine, cancel, and pick a value. Choose life. It's asking for a very specific value here. Notice a possible solution, which means all those answers, they have to represent values for A. Notice how the answers are in increasing order. That is going to be very consistent. When your answers are numbers, they usually go from smallest to largest or from largest to smallest, not like a mishmash or a random setup. By default, I'm just going to go to one of the middle answers. I'll go to my lucky number, 5. I love it. If A is equal to 5, okay, 20 divided by 4 minus 18 over 6. Oh, game over. Just have to know how to play the game. Oops, sorry. Here, 1 and done. In the last question, I had to check my answers because they had the variable. They had the unknown. This one, I'm playing nothing but numbers. It's the equivalence of looking for buried treasure. If you're dropped on an island, you have just a map with 4 X's marked, only 1 treasure buried. Well, if you're anything like me and despise cardio, you're going to go to that closest X. You're going to start digging. Say you're 50 billion feet down, regardless of how you're going to get out of that crater. You go to your next X. You start digging, all of a sudden, then clink, 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 clink. You found treasure. Should you go and dig more? Or can you now just lay around and wait to be rescued, Rich? Just know how to play the game. That's what we focus on at the Princeton Review. We study the test, so you don't exactly have to. You just have to know, though, what you need to get the job done. With the tests in the reading and the writing and language, it's not really a matter of order of difficulty. There's no established order of difficulty. With the math, if you've ever done one of these sections, either PSAT or SAT, even ACT, you notice as you got deeper in the section, they started getting really ugly. They're never impossible. A lot of the hardest questions can actually be tackled with that PETA technique I just showed you, the plugging in the answers. Just have to remember that stuff like that exists. And then you can tackle the test. With the whole thing, make sure that you are also checking like your application deadlines. A lot of people I saw in the chat, people are asking about like when would be the best time to do this. The SAT, you technically could take it anytime at all. A lot of people feel you should wait till like the end of the year because you're learning a whole nother year of education in the topic. Not necessarily. You just have to know a specific way to act for 3 hours of your life. Just take the test, that test, in a very detailed, specific way. You're going to go to college. Just have to know how to play the game. And I hope that it helped. I just wanted to give you like a little insight into it. Just your math teacher's not grading the test. It's not a math test. It's not a reading test. It's not a writing and language test. This is a test of, can you spot the tricks and traps and take them out? Focus your attention on process of elimination. 3 bad answers for every question provided on the SAT, 3/4 for the ACT. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat. I didn't see anything pop up, but if there are any questions, please sound off. Let us know. I'm going to stop the screen sharing.
That sounds great, Chris. Actually, the strategies are superb. Actually, we believe with these strategies, SAT is really achievable. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of people have taken. I've seen it make a lot of people very upset, and I promise you, there's an easier way. I promise. Just act for a certain way for 3 hours of your life. That's all I ask. Change your look on this test.
That's great to know. And from someone who's doing, doing SAT, teaching SAT for so many years, and you must be knowing it more, for sure.
I'm always the oldest one in the room. When I go to take it, I always have to sit in seat number 1. And I always knock it out of the park. Yay, I keep my job.
It's great. Okay, so the session 1 is almost done. I have answered most of the questions on the chat. If there are any more questions, please send it to us. I will put the mail ID info@maniagroup.com. You can send the questions there. Stay tuned for the next session actually. Handing over to my colleague, Vikram Balla here. He's our admission service expert. So Vikram, can you please take over?
Yes, thanks, Nirmala. That was very informative. So welcome to the admissions component of the session. So today we will talk about the US admissions, followed by a brief look at Canada and UK and question and answers after that. I'll now be handing over to Devery, who is joining us from the Princeton Review US to talk about navigating the US college admissions process. Devery is a leading admissions counselor for international partners and students at the Princeton Review. So welcome, and we all look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Hi there, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Devery Duran, and I will be talking to you today a little bit about the process of applying to college in the US. We've got a lot of information to get through, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so I'll let you know a little bit more about myself in just a moment. But today we're going to cover navigating the US admissions process. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the international admissions landscape here in the US, what colleges look for, how decisions are made in the US college system, because it's very different from anywhere else in the world, choosing where to apply, and then how Mania and the Princeton Review can help you kind of figure out this really nebulous process, and then we'll have a little time for Q&A. All right, so very quickly, just a little bit about myself. I attended Harvard for my undergraduate degree, earned my MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. I've served as a senior admissions officer at Harvard University. I've read applications for both the undergraduate and graduate programs at the University of California at Berkeley. I helped found the Princeton Review's college counseling department and have advised students one-on-one for over a decade now, helping hundreds of students gain entrance to their dream universities. All right, so very briefly, very high level overview. There are over 4,000 colleges and universities in the US. That's quite a few to choose from. There are truly a range of requirements, including standardized testing, grades, the rigor of your curriculum, the depth of participation in your extracurriculars, your letters of recommendation, your personal essays, kind of the story your entire application tells. That are a part of this process in the US. So there's no one universal application system, but there are a lot of requirements. And so it is a process of many moving parts when you are applying to a college in the States. Numerous application platforms, deadlines, restrictions. You can start applying as early as October, possibly as late as the following year. So there are many, many things to keep in mind and many things to have on your calendar as you decide to apply to college in the States. Hundreds of possible majors and areas of study as well. All right, so I think the thing that really makes attending university in the US really special is this idea of a liberal arts education. This is a term that I think is often thrown around quite a bit, and but it's not necessarily defined. But a liberal arts education is the idea that we want our students to not only study the one thing they want to go to college for, but also learn a little bit about everything else. It's important for us that our students have exposure to different areas of study and that they're not just siloed in one area. So we want our engineers to not just take math and science courses and engineering courses, but we also want them to take writing courses. We want them to take history courses, to take world languages, among other areas, because we think it's important for students to have a well-rounded education, to interact with students who are studying different areas, because that's where innovation comes from. That's how you truly learn. So liberal arts education is this idea that you are going to be really good at one area, but you're also going to know a little bit about everything else. The US, and so that's what mostly I think makes the US system pretty unique. That and the fact that we have a residential system where students mostly live on campus. We have a real emphasis on extracurricular activities. So we really want students to be involved in and outside of the classroom. That's a huge part of the community here in the US as well. So while many colleges practice liberal arts educations, and I think liberal arts education, basically all colleges do, there are some schools that are a little more specialized. So you might, as you're applying to college, you might run into, specific kind of colleges or specific schools, like a school of engineering or a school of nursing, a school of business, a school of social work. So while you can apply to specific programs, even within those schools, you're still going to be required to take classes outside of your area of focus. Also in the US, I think it's just worth noting that many pre-professional majors like pre-law, pre-med, or sometimes even pre-business, these are actually courses of study that prepare you to go on to graduate school. So you don't study law as an undergrad in the US. You don't study medicine as an undergrad in the US. Your grades and what you study matter if you want to go into these, into these two fields. But you don't come out of your undergraduate degree as a lawyer, as a doctor. You then have to go through the process again of applying, taking different tests in order to gain entrance into a graduate school of medicine or a graduate school of law. All right, so in the US, the way that we decide, or the way that we look at applications is also very different than the rest of the world. We truly want to get to know the whole student. Academics, of course, are incredibly important, right? You're going to college because this is an academic experience. But beyond academics, we really care about who the student is, what they're going to offer to the community, what they care about, how they're going to be involved with extracurriculars, organizations, what kind of roommate they're going to be. So we also look at the students' extracurriculars. We really look at their personal qualities. I want to get a sense of who a student is as I'm reading their application. So I'm going to look to their letters of recommendation that their teachers have written for them. I'm going to look at their many personal essays that they have written, so I can truly get a sense of who that student is. I don't just want to know what a student wants to study academically. I want to know how they're going to contribute to campus life as well. So most colleges in the US practice something called holistic admissions, holistic meaning whole, where they look at the whole student. Holistic review considers a student's background and context, a student's personal qualities, extracurriculars, and academics. This process does not put specific weight on any one of these qualities. Instead, it looks at the whole application. Of course, academics have to be there. The student has to be academically sound to be a compelling applicant, but most students are. When students decide which colleges to apply to, they typically, have the grades. They typically meet the standardized testing averages that school typically takes. So it really is everything else in that application that can make a student compelling. And this, I know, is really a very different process than the rest of the world. And so it is really helpful to have some guidance on this part, because it really requires students to be very introspective, but also to have spent their time in high school, doing things outside of the classroom. A big part of holistic review is trying to understand where a student comes from and getting a part of their story. And so that can be a challenge to put together in an application. As I'm reading through an entire application, I was a former Harvard admissions officer, and we definitely practice holistic review. At Harvard, 80 to 85% of the students applying were academically qualified, which means they had near perfect grades, they had really high test scores. And so those things were great. That's what got those students' that gets their foot in the door, but then it's everything else that truly makes them compelling. And so as I'm reading through an application, I'm hoping that I learn certain qualities and characteristics about a student. And some of those qualities are here. Here on the screen. This is not a checklist. You don't have to have every one of these qualities, and it doesn't have to show through on your application, but here's an idea of what I might be looking for as I'm reading through an application. We in the US, we really value students who are independent, but also collaborative. So students who can take on a project, take on a cause, and build something of their own. Students who are internally motivated, who do things because they're excited about it, who are creative and analytical thinkers. In the US, the way that you learn in your classroom environment in college is going to be to participate. Very few classes are lecture only. And so you're going to be expected to share your insights, to have a conversation in your courses. And so we want to make sure the students we're admitting are going to do that they're not just going to sit back and listen to the professor, but that they're going to share their perspectives, because that is what's so valuable about having a diverse student body, is the different perspectives that students are bringing. We want students who have great follow through, meaning, they decide they're going to do something and they do it. Students who are committed, and they can show that commitment through their extracurriculars in high school. So how they get involved with something and stick with it. We want students who are resilient, meaning if something doesn't go your way, or you don't do well at something the first time, you get back up and you keep trying until you actually achieve what you're going for. We want students who are passionate, students who care about what they're doing, are excited about what they're doing in and outside of the classroom. We want students who are truly themselves, authentically themselves, which is a challenging thing to do in the application, but we truly do want to get to know a student beyond their academics in that application. So the better the essays, the more personal the essays, the better we get to know you as a person. All right, so let's see. All right, so liberal arts. Okay. So this idea of liberal arts, I think, is what makes the US education really special. We've got, so this idea of these liberal arts values, this idea of, learning a little bit about other areas interests you, then I think probably looking into US colleges might be a good fit. But it's also important to think about, will a US education help you achieve your goals? You know, a moment ago, I mentioned that for us, like, law and medicine aren't undergraduate degrees. So you actually have to go on to law school, which is another 3 years, and medicine school, which is another, 5+ years once you go through all the training. And if that's something that you want to do, and you want to do that in your home country, or you want to do it outside of the US, then it might make sense to go somewhere else. But, to not go to school in the US. But if you're open to that and that's something you want to do, then it's definitely a good idea to look at what the US, look at the US colleges. So is the US a better fit than your home country or than another country that you might want to go to? But if you've answered yes, then it's great. Now we get to look at those 4,000 plus US universities, and we've got to start thinking about, what are the colleges that are going to be the best fit for you? So that means we've got to look beyond like the US News and World Report that, kind of arbitrarily ranks colleges for, and they have some stats in there, but like they aren't going to talk about like what is truly good for you specifically as a person. And so the college process is actually one that takes a lot of research. You want to dig in, you want to, look at the Princeton Review website, you want to look at the college specific websites, and you want to see what is it like to be a student here academically, inside the classroom, what kind of community is it? Because not all 4,000 of the colleges in the US are a good fit for you. Not all of the Ivies are a good fit for you. It's really about digging in and saying to yourself, why is this, how is this college going to help me achieve my goals? How am I going to contribute to it? And why is this a good place for me? And so this is really a process. And this is what we do on our side with the Princeton Review, is we help you think this through. We help you come up with a list so that you can really concentrate on, a few colleges to apply to. All right, so shifting gears just for a moment, this is from the International Education website, and this is kind of about like what we believe international students want when they come to the US. So, they want high quality academic experiences, they want personal and professional growth, including close interaction with professors. They want to do cutting edge science, scientific research and work in, innovative areas. They want internships and experiential learning. They want affordability if possible, and they want postgraduate study opportunities, possibly, the opportunity to stay in the US. And so that's why we often see, a large number of international students applying to US institutions. On the other side, universities in the US really want international students. As I mentioned before, we really value having diverse perspectives in the classroom. So it's important to us that it's not just students from the US in our classrooms. With this new administration, we are hoping that it becomes very apparent that international students are very welcome. But even over the last few years, colleges have really gone out of their way to try and increase outreach so international students know that they were welcome on campus. At the governmental level, at the education level, we in the US really do want international students to come, and I just kind of want to really make that very clear, because it is a colleges really want you there, and so they do welcome you to apply if it's the right fit for you. And then just a quick chart of what many international students end up studying in the US. We see a lot of students in STEM and engineering, business and management, but we also have students doing social sciences, fine arts, many students who go in undeclared. The beauty of the US college system as well is that for the most part, you don't have to choose your major, your area of study until your sophomore year, until your second year in college. So you actually have time to come and try out things, enjoy that liberal arts, like general education program where you get to try different classes in different departments until you decide what you want to study. So that's also really nice about the US system, is that there's flexibility. You can change your mind, and you're actually expected to change your mind. All right. So now I'm going to shift again to, coming from an admissions officer's perspective, when we're reading applications, like what do we find important? So in green, you can actually see here, everything in green actually refers to academics. So we're looking at grades in your courses, strength of your curriculum, your test scores, your overall high school GPA. In blue, we're looking at your personal qualities. So what do we learn about you in your essay? You know, have you actively demonstrated your interest to attend this college? Have you done your research? Have you attended an information session online? What do your counselors and teachers have to say about you in the recommendation letters? And then in purple at the bottom, we also have extracurriculars. So colleges are looking at academics, extracurriculars, and personal qualities. When we are discussing your applications or reviewing your applications, you know, here are some questions that go through our minds. You know, so has the applicant made the most coming from their context? Meaning, if you go to a very well-resourced high school, have you been able to be really active at that high school? Have you participated in extracurriculars, led some of those, you know, come up with some initiatives? You know, have you made the most coming from where you're coming from, is what we're looking at. Has the student challenged themselves academically, and can they do the work at our college, and can they do it well? That's a big one for us, because we don't want students to struggle, and we don't want students to spend all of their time in the library when they're not in the classroom. Because we have hundreds of extracurricular organizations on campus, it's really important for us that you come, you can do the work, you can, you know, engage with professors, engage with your classmates, but also be active outside of the classroom. You know, is the applicant going to contribute to class discussion? Is the applicant going to contribute to the greater community? And is there evidence for that? So, like, you know, we look at your extracurriculars in high school. Can we see that you are used to contributing outside of the classroom? We're going to ask ourselves, why is this college, why is this program a good fit for the applicant? Do people want to be around this person? That's also important because, as I mentioned, our campuses are mostly residential. So even if you only live on campus for 1 year, if you live on campus all 4 years, depending on the institution, you're going to be someone's roommate at some point. And we want to make sure people want to be around you, that you're a good person. You know, we're looking for substance in the application, authenticity in the application. So beyond just, I want to go to the school so I can study this and get a good job, which is very valid. We want to go, okay, well, what else is there? Like, what, you know, how did you get interested in this topic? Why do you want to study it? You know, what do you hope to do? Who are you as a person? Like, what causes do you care about? Like, I'm looking for a lot more information than just, you know, what do you want to study from now on? And what are you going to do with it? Can we imagine the student on our campus? Like, as I read through your whole application, like, my takeaway should be that I could envision you on my college campus. You've given me enough information, you've done enough research, you've, you know, shown me throughout that application that this college is the right fit for you. And also, lastly, you know, did the student write this application on their own? So we just want to make sure that it's in your own words, that it's not like your mom or your dad that wrote your essay for you, but that it's, you know, that it's something that you put together. With guidance is great, but we want to make sure it's always in your own words. Some additional factors that actually go into the process. So you'll see that, especially with top universities, or highly selective institutions in the US, like the Ivy League institutions and a number of other colleges after that, that many colleges in the US have under a 10% acceptance rate, which means only about 1 in 10 students or fewer get into that college when they apply. And so there are many, but there are other factors that are also part of this process. So when we are looking at a student, we're also, you know, asking ourselves, like, what are our college's priorities for that year? Like, do we, you know, there's always, you know, we have these things called institutional needs. So it could be that we have a new band program and we want to, you know, have a new band program and we want to make sure that we're, you know, admitting enough students to be in that band. It could be that we have a new varsity sports team and we want to make sure that we can fill that sports team. It could, you know, it can be a number of things that we have. Schools might have a new initiative to increase the number of students who are coming from, you know, from a non-US from a non-US location, so our international students. So, we look at geographic location. Where does the student come from? In the US, for domestic students specifically, we look at ethnic background. We might look at religious background as a positive. Like, we are looking to see that we want our students to come from diverse backgrounds, have diverse perspectives. And so we really value that here. And those are things that we want to know about in your application. But diversity also can be, what you want to study. We don't want everyone to study biology at our school. We have 40 to 100 different majors or different departments at colleges. So we want to make sure it's not just everybody wants to study bio, but somebody, we hope students also want to be in psychology or anthropology or, be in the journalism department, whatever it may be. So we want students who are going to study, who have diversity in their choices of major, diversity in their extracurriculars, and so on. A couple of other things that we don't really have time to get into, though, when we're looking at a student's application is when they decide to apply. We have very different timelines in the US, but early applications typically happen beginning in October or November, the year before you're actually going to attend. And when a student decides to apply, could also be kind of an indicator of how serious the student is about that college. So another thing we do at the Princeton Review is help you kind of strategize, when to apply to certain colleges to make sure that you are giving yourself the best chance possible of gaining entrance. Choosing where to apply is a process. It's not just something where you can go, all right, I'm going to look at the top 10 schools on the US News World Report and I'm going to just apply to those. It's a process. You've got to figure out what your goals are. You've got to think about what environment am I really going to thrive in? Maybe you shouldn't be at a large public university like the University of California, Berkeley. It has a great name, but maybe it's not the best fit for you because it's a large school. Maybe you need something that's a little more intimate, something where you're going to be able to really interact with your professors and get certain classes that you're looking for. Again, that's something that we can help you kind of think through, but it's truly a process. There's a lot of research that goes into it because many colleges are going to ask you to be super specific in their applications, about why you want to be there. And it can't be a generic answer. It can't be, oh, well, you have a department I'm interested in, you got a great reputation, and I want to work in the US after. While that's all valid, that statement could work for any college, and a college wants to know that you've done your research and you're really excited about being there. So doing the research, attending information sessions, possibly visiting when things open up again, those are important parts of the process in deciding what is going to be the best fit for you. It should be based around fit and not rankings. And it really needs to be an introspective process where you think beyond just this school has a great brand, I want to be there, but you think about, who are you? What do you want out of this? What do you want? What do you hope to achieve? What kind of environment are you going to thrive in? What kind of people do you want to be around? It's truly a process. And the earlier you get started in high school, the better, because you really want to make sure that you are doing extracurriculars at your summers, you have activities over the summers, that you're building relationships with your teachers so they can write recommendation letters for you, and that you can get started on this research process, earlier rather than later. Just kind of a quick overview of what it might look like. So you can see from freshman to junior year, so grade 9 to grade 11, assuming a 4-year college, a 4-year high school experience, that it's about, taking the right classes, making sure you're getting good grades, making sure that you have a good number of extracurriculars and that you're really involved with them, that you're starting your standardized tests and you're starting your research, up through kind of junior to senior year. Then it's about you doing your college research, writing your essays, practicing for interviews, submitting your application, and so on. All right, so the importance of starting this process now is that US applications consider grades, courses, and your activities from 9th to 12th grade. So we're going to look at all of your grades from high school. We're going to look at all of your activities from high school. And so if you maybe didn't have the best 9th and 10th grade year, maybe you weren't really taking your classes seriously, that can affect where you can apply in the US or where you're going to really have a good chance of getting in. And so the earlier you start this process, the earlier you start these conversations, like the more flexibility you're going to have and where you can apply. And that being said, even if you don't start really thinking about this till 11th grade, we can still help you. We can still help you think through what your options are and help you kind of get on the right track. Grades are not enough to gain entrance to top universities in the US. I think I mentioned earlier that about 80 to 85% of the students applying to Harvard have near perfect grades, near perfect scores. So you have to think about what makes you stand out. And so it's going to be, those grades are expected. So then it's, what are your extracurriculars? What are your personal qualities? Who are you as a person? What makes you a compelling applicant? US has, in the US, we have an emphasis on fit, cultural fit, community fit, not just academic fit, which is unique to our process. Introspection and knowing yourself is integral to being successful in this process. It's not something that's covered in high school, and it's not a type of writing that's covered in high school. And so the earlier you can get started with this, the earlier you can really think about what you're looking for, the better prepared you'll be when it comes time to actually write your applications. All right, that was a ton of information. I know y'all have a few questions, and we'll get to them. We'll have a little bit of time in I think towards the end of the program, but I want to pass back the presentation to Vikram so that they can discuss alternative destinations to Canada and the UK.
Thank you, Devery. That was most insightful. And what I'm also happy to note for the benefit of the audience is that a lot of what you presented on the holistic admissions process for the US, to some extent or to a great extent, the competitive institutions in Canada and UK, destinations that we are going to look at shortly, also value the entire holistic process of admission. So that's a great insight for students here this evening. So I'll just get started with UK and Canada and UK in a minute. Can you see my video?
No, we can't. We can now.
All right, thank you. So there's been a tremendous growth in students pursuing their bachelor's degrees in Canada and UK, and they offer a equally high quality of international education with a great emphasis on research and originality, just like the US. There's also a very large variety of courses and majors available in these destinations. One difference compared to the US is that the bachelor's degrees here tend to be fairly structured, and students cannot configure their educational experience and change courses and majors as often as they can in the US. So for students looking for a more structured bachelor's degree, these destinations tend to offer that. The admissions timelines are a bit relaxed, especially in comparison to US universities.
Seems like you're muted here.
Yeah. Sorry, just
Great.
facing some tech challenges there. And so the admissions timelines are a bit relaxed compared to the US. These destinations also tend to be a little bit more affordable, and that's mainly down to the foreign exchange rates with India. And the English language test IELTS typically suffices for admissions to most degrees. Okay, let's now look at the study landscape in Canada. Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Halifax, and Vancouver are amongst the typical student destinations, though students do end up studying in other parts of the country as well. Now, quality of life is a Canadian promise, and in fact, Canada offers one of the best work-life balances in the world, and this is something the country is famous for. This is a very diverse location to study in, and apart from the typical types of diversity which you find in major education destinations across the world, one thing to note is that Canada is bilingual and French is the second most popular language spoken in almost most parts of the country. Now, when it comes to choosing a university location, one major factor to keep in mind is the weather, because especially for students going from India, uh, many parts of Canada tend to be extremely cold. Now, a broad range of courses is available in Canada. One of the major attractions which drives students to Canada is the co-op, which is an inbuilt work experience students can undertake as part of their bachelor's degree for up to a year during a 4-year bachelor's. Canadian universities also have a holistic admissions review process, and the top 10 institutions in Canada make a lot of emphasis on academic achievement of students. Now, when it comes to applying to Canada, there are two broad platforms. The first, universities in Ontario, OUAC is the only platform that you need to use. For universities in other provinces, each institution has its own online application. The application procedures themselves are quite easy and simple. The cost of applying generally tends to be low compared to other countries. When it comes to universities, the processing times are generally long, so it's better to apply early. Colleges in Canada, however, offer very quick admissions decisions. Now, the Canadian admissions review process is fairly similar to the US, where academic achievement is emphasized. Extracurricular activities also receive weightage. Essays, personal statements, CVs, and recommendation letters can help each student differentiate themselves from other applicants. And the IELTS is typically the only test that is required. Now, when it comes to the co-op, this is an opportunity to gain work experience during your bachelor's. And not only do you gain work experience which enriches your CV, uh, undertaking a relevant co-op also reduces the cost of education, as you don't need to pay tuition fees during your co-op semester or semesters. At the same time, you continue to earn academic credit. Now, when it comes to working in Canada, as a student, you can work for 20 hours a week. After you graduate, you can work for up to 3 years. And once you worked in Canada for 3 years, it is fairly easy to qualify for the PR. This is just a typical application checklist, the usual stuff. Some universities might request for a WES evaluation, so that's something you need to keep in mind. This is the typical timeline. It all starts in September and October and of the previous year, and the session starts in September of the following year. Okay, coming on to the UK now very quickly. The major cities in UK which a lot of students typically end up studying in are London, Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, and Glasgow, especially students who want a big city experience. Now, one unique thing about the UK is that there are a lot of high quality institutions which are located in campus towns, and that provides a fairly different education experience compared to studying in a big city. So that's something to keep in mind. The UK is equally diverse as the other countries we have been talking about, with large Asian and European population. Weather is not a factor actually when it comes to choosing where to study in the UK, because it rains everywhere, and besides that, it's moderately cold in the winter. A broad range of courses are available, and you can actually save time by studying in the UK because the bachelor's degree is typically of 3 years duration compared to North American bachelors, which tend to be 4 years. And the top universities in the UK do place a lot of academic emphasis when it comes to reviewing students who apply. So this is the single window to apply to UK universities. It's the UCAS application form through which students can apply to 5 universities at a time. Otherwise, the application procedures are very simple and it's a completely online process. And the cost of applying is extremely low because it's just a one-time application fee of a little more than 2,500 rupees, which you can pay to apply to 5 universities. It's recommended to apply early because the processing times tend to be fairly long, especially at competitive institutions. So what do the UK universities look for in students? So possibly academic achievement and grades receive a very, very high weightage in the UK admissions process, especially at the top universities, and probably a far greater emphasis compared to North American universities. Extracurricular activities do receive some weightage. The personal statement and recommendation letter can help an applicant differentiate themselves. And overall, it's a very streamlined process. The academic IELTS is typically required at all institutions. Now, one of the recent changes when it comes to studying in the UK is that international students from India can now work for up to 2 years after graduation. And that's a feature which a lot of students are happy about, because like Canada and the US, UK now offers the opportunity to have immersive work experience after completing your education there. Otherwise, during your studies, students can work for 20 hours a week and full-time during holidays. And one thing to note is that the 2-year work permit in the UK is open for students irrespective of which major they graduate with. It's not just for science, technology, engineering, or mathematics students. So a very simple application checklist. Everything is online. And this is the timeline. Most students would target the 15th January deadline, which is like the universal deadline for applying to universities in the UK for undergraduate studies. The offer letters start coming in between March and May, and then after that, students apply for the visa, and September, mid to late September is when the course starts. So that was a quick overview of study in Canada and UK to supplement the discussion that we had on the US. So we'll just move on to our question and answers now. Before that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Princeton Review brought to you in India by Mania Education. So in India, we have trained over 300,000 students. We have over 600 global university partnerships. We are located at over 45 locations across 22 cities and have more than 20 years of experience. We also have partnerships with over 250 colleges and universities in India for test prep. So moving on to questions and answers now.
Hi, Nirmala. I've got some questions here. If you would like me to go through some of these.
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. So this can be either for Debbie or Vikram. How much weight do universities give to choice of major while reading the application?
I'll take that for the US perspective. So when we are looking at your application, like I mentioned, there are going to be a few colleges that might say, okay, if you want to go directly into a school of engineering, they might have certain requirements, right? They might say, oh, we want to see advanced math. We want to see at least, calculus on your transcript. Like they might have a few requirements if you are intending on, going into a more STEM focused major. For the most part, when you're deciding on a major, they just want to understand kind of why, right? Like they want to know, have you been taking classes in that area? Have you maybe been doing some self-study in that area if those courses aren't offered at your high school? Basically, they just want to know what you're thinking about studying and why. As I mentioned, most colleges expect you to change your mind at some point, or at least kind of tweak it a little bit. But it's not, for the most part, it's not something that, can kind of make, let me rephrase that. For the most part, they're just trying to get a sense of what you want to do and if you're prepared to do it. So for example, if you say, oh, I really want to be a writer and I want to study English literature, if those are your worst grades on your transcript, like maybe you constantly get B's and C's in English, but you get A's and everything else, they might say to themselves, ooh, is this major really the best fit for them? So I just want to make sure that you've been thoughtful about the major, that you meet any requirements that they might have, and that there's a story that kind of makes sense in your application about why you want to study that. When you are filling out your application, most schools are going to have like supplemental essays where you can talk about what you want to study and why. And so they're going to want that background story. Here's what I've been doing. Here's why I like this. Here's how I'm going to take advantage of this major at your school. And and here's why your college is a good fit for me to achieve, these goals in the future.
Great, thank you. Another question, what is the could you speak to international acceptance rates, international students at either tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 schools?
It's gonna honestly it's gonna vary from college to college. There's no kind of general acceptance rate. I want to say that. So, I mean, depending on colleges, and I don't really know which tier 1 and tier 2 really stands for, but any colleges are going to always have some international students on campus. I think there may be a few colleges that have upwards of 20%, but I want to say that for most, it's probably around 10 to 15% international students.
Great. And for general comparison between schools and how competitive different schools are, I also just put a link to our princetonreview.com website where you can search for schools and find some admissions information there and other information about the schools as well. And one other question asking about when early decision is, which is supposed by school.
Yeah, so early applications in the US tend to be November 1st. There are some applications that are due October 15th. So anywhere between October 15th to November 15th are typically going to be your early application deadlines.
Great. And then I saw some other specific questions here. Just wanted to acknowledge these. Thank you for asking questions in the chat. For questions about specific, fields of study or major or, your specific situation, then, please reach out to us. And yeah, the best place to do that would be this contact info that you see on your screen here. For example, this info@manyagroup.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions there. And also, I believe that we'll be sending out you will be working with Manya to send out a frequently asked questions sheet at the end. Thank you all for your questions. These were there was particularly some great ones here that I think would be good for everyone to learn more about. So stay tuned for that email that will be sent out to which you registered for the event. Great. So, okay, yeah. Just passing back to Manya team. Did anyone have any closing information or anything else?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
Of course.
I'll just quickly answer this question which Renuka has asked. When a student takes up a co-op, do the number of semesters get extended during their study in Canada? So no, Renuka, actually co-op is part of the 4-year bachelor's degree, and you actually earn academic credit for it. So the duration of the program doesn't actually get extended. And there's another question about, do American universities prefer TOEFL over IELTS? Generally, yes, but most American universities, or almost all American universities, accept the IELTS as well. There's a question here about admissions requirements for architecture. So typically it's the same admissions requirements as everything else, but in the case of architecture, if you have a portfolio to show, it definitely adds a lot of value to your application over and above extracurriculars, academic achievements, good grades, math in your high school curriculum, and everything else. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. For other questions, please write to us at info@manyagroup.com or call us on 1-800-102-4646. So thank you to all the speakers. That was a very insightful session, and I hope the audience found it equally useful. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.